a lot of folks are saying, they're feeling uncertain. And when people are feeling uncertain or scared, they gravitate to what they know and what feels safe.
Right. Yes.
And you and me, we're all about exceeding uncertainty.
Right.
And it's funny. And you said about how do you know unless you try? And I'm lucky because I was, for people that are only listening or don't see me, I was born without my hands and my legs.
Right.
And, first day of school, my mom had this negotiation with the principal of right along those themes of how do you know unless you try?
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. Audley Stevenson here, back for another edition of hands down the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here with us as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel by tapping that bell down below. Ding, ding, ding. And you'll be immediately connected to all good things Audacious related. We've got a great episode lined up for you once again. And I promise you, by the end of this installment of the Audacious Living Podcast, you are going to be left with an unstoppable feeling. I say this confidently, largely due to the fact that today's guest on the podcast, she is complete. Unstoppable is exactly what defines her. Unstoppable Tracy Schmitt will be here to share her remarkable story of perseverance, determination, and a never quit attitude. If you're not familiar with Tracy and her story, let me start off by letting you know that she is a four-way amputee, born without any feet or hands. But don't let that stop you for a moment, because she has probably accomplished more with her limitations than most people have who are fully abled. You see, from an early age, Tracy had this unstoppable mindset that was instilled in her by her outstanding mother. Tracy's mind wasn't telling her she was doing something special. She was just doing what she felt she was doing, what most kids wanted to do. And that's go outside and play and have fun with all the other kids. And that's exactly what Tracy did. You're absolutely going to love to hear about her story and learning about her background almost as much as I loved having her on the podcast. It really is a fantastic conversation, and I'm certain that all of you will take something away from it. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Unstoppable Tracy. Enjoy. Unstoppable Tracy, it is so awesome to have you here with me on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Well, thank you, Audacious Audley. How wonderful. It is magnificent to be here. Humbled and honored.
Oh, you know what? It's and as I mentioned before we got going here, I had the wonderful pleasure of hearing your speaking, hearing your message, and everything you talked about just resonated with the foundational principles of this podcast, right? Being bold, taking risks, taking chances, go out and try things. You never know, anything's possible, all those sort of mindsets. And so that's why I had to have you come through here, Tracy, and spend some time. As I was saying earlier, I just think that there's so, we were talking, I had to press record because I don't want to lose any of the good stuff. But I think there's just so much value in trying things, right? And let's kind of start our conversation, Tracy, if you don't mind, because until you try things, I think the biggest thing for me is that you have no idea those blocks and what they may lead to. So you do this, and this will take you here, and this will take you there. But when you stop and look back, you would never been able to do those things if you didn't take that first step, right?
Yes. Oddly, it's so funny because you and I reconnected after the presentation through LinkedIn. And there is a ton of stuff on LinkedIn about Uber announcing, the honor of working there. And basically a lot of the strategists like yourself, you're such an extraordinary consultant, which is amazing.
Thank you.
But a lot of folks are saying, they're feeling uncertain. And when people are feeling uncertain or scared, they gravitate to what they know and what feels safe.
Right. Yes.
And you and me, we're all about exceeding uncertainty.
Right.
And it's funny. And you said about, how do you know unless you try? And I'm lucky because I was, for people that are only listening or don't see me, I was born without my hands and my legs.
Right.
And, first day of school, my mom had this negotiation with the principal of right along those themes of how do you know unless you try? And he was telling me, and it was a different time, like give him credit. It was the 70s, right?
Understood.
They don't have educational assistants.
Right. Correct.
And so he said, we can't have Tracy, right? How does she tie her shoelaces? How does she go to the washroom? And my mom, instead of being all like mama bear and defensive,
right,
she was so kind. And she just said with the kindest eyes, and I think kindness gets us a long way.
100%.
Yes, bold, audaciously, affirming, not angry and assertively, but still kindly.
Yes.
And she just said, how come?
Right.
And she didn't say why, because why it's a trigger word,
correct,
right?
Correct.
And so she said, how come?
Right. Yeah.
And he explained that, without my hands and without my legs and one teacher and 30 kids, 35-year-olds.
Right.
And in kindergarten, you're 4 and you're 5 and you're 6, like 30 hooligans, never been to school before. I mean, precious little angels.
Of course.
Did I use my outside voice? Yeah.
Let's close that door.
Yeah, I'm a teacher too.
Yes. Get it.
Yes. I might have just ended my teaching career there, but
you're okay, Tracy. You're okay.
Yeah, you think I'll be okay?
Yeah.
And my mom said, I totally understand.
Mm.
And that's when she counteroffered what you coached. She said, can we just try?
Yeah.
And he eventually said yes, but that we'd have to find another school. 70s was segregated.
Yes.
And so none of the kids, no one, officially, we got this letter home. You have to be able to tie your shoelaces.
Right.
So the assumption was no hands. I can't tie my shoelaces.
Right.
And so my mom, she got down on her knees and she held my arms in that parental grip.
Yes.
And she looked me eye to eye, like I am with you. And she just said, Tracy, it's really important that you and nobody's left behind.
Mm.
Well, I'm 5 years old. I have no idea why she's so serious.
Right.
I don't realize if I don't get outside for recess, I don't get to stay at this school.
Exactly.
And I feel like this pandemic is like recess time all over again.
You're correct.
We're all trying to get outside into that schoolyard of life.
That's right.
And business and breakthroughs with, the ministries and our businesses.
Yes.
I just got a really affordable wetsuit for scuba diving.
Okay, nice.
Because sadly, the man has gone out of business. And so he's just selling off his stock because he doesn't have an overhead store anymore.
Understood. Yeah.
So
it's realities.
Yeah. So, everybody's struggling, whether you have a disability or not, a job or not.
Yes.
Right. And then with the campaign.
That's correct.
Right. There's all these missions about look at the gaps in long-term care housing.
Yes.
Right. 900 people on a waiting list and people want to be at home, but we don't have the resources to do efficient, reliable home care. Right.
Correct.
All of us are trying to get on that playground.
Yes. No, you're right. I think that's a great analogy, Tracy. And I want to really quickly, because you made a really good point. I want to go back and I'm sorry to interrupt your story here.
Please do.
The point around when your mother ask the question, how come versus why. And you made a point of saying, why is a trigger word? And I 100% agree with you. How come, what that allows the individual is to process themselves and answer that question, because sometimes we have barriers that are built up that we don't know why they're there. They're just there. And they just exist. And it's not until we say, well, how come, do we start doing internal process ourselves? So I want to touch on it because I thought that was a really significant point.
I love that. See, look at the extraordinary executive high performance coach we have in Audley. Amazing, audacious Audley. It's true. And it was a lucky accident on my mom's part.
Yes.
Whereas you use how come so strategically, and we can all use the how come now, right?
Sure.
And so he saw my mom on her knees,
yes,
holding my arms,
yes.
asking me, telling me nobody left behind. And so now the principal's heart is in his stomach.
Yes.
And he runs outside to find me.
Right.
And I wasn't there. And he's just like, I haven't told the story in a while. I told it with you just the other day, and now you can't see on the Zoom, but my hair is standing up on my arm, my stomach. You know, when you're like, you think of a car accident or a conversation, and you're just like, oh, I've got that feeling again.
The chills, yeah.
And the principal asked my teacher, what happened? He's like, couldn't Tracy tie her shoelaces? And she's all confused. And she says, actually, Tracy is the first one to tie her shoelaces.
Amazing.
It's like, well, how come she's not outside? She goes, oh, her little friend couldn't tie her shoelaces.
Yeah.
None of the 30 kids could tie their shoelaces. And what did my mom say?
Yep.
Nobody
left behind.
Yes. And she meant me. She's like, don't leave yourself out.
That's right.
And that's been my survival in the pandemic is, you know, if I'm feeling low is okay, how do I make a difference for others? And that gives me the strength to face another day. Right. And it's so funny. And how come the only student with no hands?
That's right.
Was the only one required to be able to tie their shoelaces.
Right.
And the principal was a loving, caring, magical man.
Yep.
He was not a mean person.
No. You know, you made a great point earlier when you talked about the time. This was the 70s where this wasn't, you know, first of all, administrators or educators weren't trained to even how to deal with someone with no arms and no legs. Like how do you, no hands, no legs? How do you do that? And so and I appreciate you giving that individual some grace, because I think it's important that we do. But it is brand new and no one meant any harm by it. They just didn't know better is what I would say.
Yeah. Well, and we were set up for success in segregated schools, right? Like that's where he thought I would have the most support. And his like, how do I tie my shoelaces? How do I go to the washroom with no hands and no legs? Right. So his questions weren't illogical when he said, how come?
That's right.
Yeah. And, you know, and I think we have a lot of standard operating procedures in our programs for people with disabilities, in our long-term care wards, in our businesses.
Right.
And I think the pandemic really and when we say, oh, people can't work from home, we don't have the infrastructure.
Oh yeah.
And then magic wand, boom, we have a lot of people successfully working from home.
That's right.
It's the same thing, right?
Right.
And so I learned as a 5-year-old that no, N-O, when the principal said no, he meant no, K-N-O-W.
Yeah, that's correct.
He just didn't know.
That's right.
Yeah. And he never said no again.
Yeah. No, well, and I think what happens is you go through an experience like that and you start to realize and almost check yourself, Tracy, where it's like, wait a second. What other barriers am I putting up? What other blockades or obstacles am I putting in front of people that make them think that they can't because I didn't know K-N-O-W, right?
Yeah. And, you know, you and me, we have a lifetime of practice of challenging and stretching ourselves and seeing breakthroughs even with others.
Yes.
But I don't know about you, Audley, but even myself, like in the first year, I was like powerhouse. I lost weight. I got
Sure.
stronger. I like
Sure.
my business pivoted. You know, I
Yep.
went virtual instead
Yep.
of stages. But in the second year, I got this opportunity to possibly go to Egypt
Okay. Okay.
and scuba dive the Red Sea.
Yep.
And maybe, likely, the first and only 4-way amputee to do that in the Red Sea. And the old Tracy said, yes, I want to ski. Yes, I want to fly airplanes. Yes, I want to sail against able-bodied men. Yes, I want a horseback ride. Yes, I want to jump out of an airplane. Yes, I want a bobsled, right? And yes, I want to do my master's in business. Yes, I want to be a teacher in 40 countries, right? I never, ever said no.
Right.
And in the second year of the pandemic, and I'm a master certified scuba diver. I'm not a beginner. I wasn't looking to try my hand at scuba diving.
This was your thing.
I've done over 100 dives.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I don't know if I could fly to Egypt and scuba dive, and I'm not sure. And how will people receive me? Like, who is that person? Like, where did that come from?
Tracy, it makes you question yourself. You know, I think back, actually, ironically enough, this very same podcast was started during the pandemic because I was sort of going through this, like, what's going on with me? Like, what's happening? And it actually took me some time to figure out what was going on. What was going on was that the things that, you know, I loved and enjoyed were taken away.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what else can I do? And what else was important to me? And absolutely, you know, taking risks and being bold. And that's where this platform started, was in the midst of this uncertainty, in this midst of me questioning myself, same like as you did. And I think what's important in that, and I'm certain you as well, as experiences where you didn't let that stop you there. That initial, you know, whether they call that, pause is a great word, and there's nothing wrong with pausing, because pausing gives you the opportunity to reframe, to rethink, but then you launch forward. And that's been my experience, obviously, with you as well.
Yes. And it was a big breakthrough for Egypt, right?
Yes.
They, which was amazing. And a phenomenal man in Egypt had been there in business for 30 years. And in the pandemic, he remodeled, because there was nobody in his place of business in Sharm el Sheikh, and they restructured, and they put in an accessible room
amazing
in their dive club, which is like unbelievably heard of in Egypt. Like in Egypt, I've been to Uganda, Nepal, Jamaica, Mexico. Like I've been in over 40 countries. In many remote places, like in Uganda, they didn't care that I had no hands and no legs, because it was such a war-torn country that many people had disabilities as a result, horrific reasons. But I was so far north in Uganda that nobody where I was a volunteer teacher for had seen my white skin. And they were all calling me Munu. And I don't know what that was. I thought it had to do with no hands and no legs.
Skin.
And it was my skin. So, but in Egypt, even more than that, like most ever in the entire world, they were all very much stopping and staring dead in their tracks in their street. It was like I was a zombie or something, like something really unique and unusual for me to be seen in Egypt. It was dumbfounding. I couldn't believe the reaction that I drew there.
You undoubtedly opened some eyes, I'm certain, in a lot of ways.
And it's funny. I met a man in the hall here in Toronto, and I told him about my experience. And he's Egyptian, and his mom's Egyptian. And he says, it's not because of your disability. It's because you were walking the street. It was because you were having a drink, and because you were scuba diving. You weren't holed up, hiding away, getting assisted in a wheelchair. You were being done for. I'm not saying there's different ways of somebody who uses a wheelchair, and then somebody who's wheelchair bound, and we're not bound to a chair. Even quadruple people who are paralyzed with all four limbs often can weight bear and body surf their car, even though they're a quadriplegic, right? Like we're not bound to the chair.
Right. Well, so much of it is the mindset, Tracy. And I want to, so on the mindset piece, I want to get into the unstoppable, Tracy. Like because as much as you know, I would imagine the unstoppable part sort of came later in life. Yeah. At 5 years old, it sounded like you started to develop that mindset already. You already were unstoppable at 5 years old.
Well, and I just like any other kid wanted to get in the playground.
Right.
I'm not a hero because I was born with a disability.
Right.
I just wanted to play like all the other kids.
Yes.
But I got to learn early, right, that you're going to told no and you're going to have obstacles and you just got to do whatever it takes to get to the cookie jar, whether you have hands and legs or not. Right. I have to figure out how to get it.
Right.
And you know, so you talk about being unstoppable and you talk about that pause moment. And I remember, you know, at the end of a job that I absolutely loved, I supported Air Canada with bankruptcy and mergers and pilot strikes.
Right.
And that job ended and I was devastated. And then I got this amazing job with Shoppers Drug Mart.
Okay.
And so I learned that, you know, something ends, but something new begins.
Yes.
And so once you've had something really devastating, it often helps you. Once you've had the bonus of seeing something, another door opens. You don't have to blindly believe that anymore because you've lived a possibility where it has happened.
Yes.
And Shoppers Drug Mart was that for me. And, you know, pharmaceutical reform changed overnight and good for Shoppers Drug Mart. I was a facilitator and I facilitated conversations and heads smarter than me said, we need to increase beauty. We need to increase baby items. We need to increase food items. And we outperformed the stock market.
Amazing.
But I outperformed the stock market out of a job.
Right.
And so I was sad in a parking lot. And I believe what you focus on grows.
Yes.
And I was afraid that if I focused on how sad I was about my job ending that day, even though I knew ultimately another door is going to open.
Right.
But I was pausing in the parking lot.
Yep.
If I drive home feeling like this, like I'm going to attract a pole to fall over on me or a lightning bolt or something, right? Or just not focused and drive poorly, right? Like, and so what's going to cheer me up no matter what?
Yes.
And I said, sailing does that. And so it's October. And it's 10:30 in the morning and there's no sailing or skiing in Toronto.
Right.
So I Googled and I found a sailing regatta in San Diego and they had boats that I knew. So I flew down to San Diego 5:30 that same day.
Oh, wow.
Right. I Googled, I got flights, I got my butt down there for this weekend spontaneous regatta.
That's awesome.
And unbeknownst to me, it was a North American regatta, a series of races. And I just wanted a recreational pick-me-up, right?
Yes.
Like I wasn't racing.
You want to feel good.
I wanted to feel good. And the U.S. Paralympic coach was there.
Wow.
And all the other sailors, they were all vying points to get on the Paralympic teams.
Right. And
I'm just a casual. And on the first race, on the first day, with all these high performance people, I got a bullet. Which means in sailing, I got a first place. And I think I just caught a great wind shift. Yeah. I don't think it was any real extraordinary talent. I think there was some sailing talent, but it was mostly I was on the right place on the water where the wind was. Yeah, and I smoked their butts.
but you know, Tracy, you wouldn't have been there if you didn't get down to San Diego to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So
I wasn't planning on it. I had no idea.
Right.
And San Diego that weekend was during Hurricane Sandy.
Okay.
And they flooded subways and they washed away, like in New York subway, totally flooded. Yep. They washed away homes in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And I was in the air flying to Toronto when it hit. And I'd worked for Air Canada 8 years. I knew that we were essentially very safe despite turbulence.
Sure.
But we just got some horrific turbulence and this 6-foot man got thrown across the aisle. And in that moment, my heart just like, okay, this is it. And so I said, if I live, I want to pursue my Paralympic dream. And the plane went flat. And that could be coincidence.
Sure.
But I make that mean that I need to pursue my Paralympic dream.
Yes.
And so I Googled and I Facebooked and I phoned and all these people. How do I pursue the Canada team? How do I get into sailing Paralympics? And I didn't even know there was sailing Paralympics for Canada until that weekend. It was the U.S. Paralympic coach that thought I was American.
Right.
She's like, what are you doing here? We're like, where did you come from? And I'm like, I'm Tracy from Toronto. And she's like, oh, because she wanted me for the U.S.
One of the U.S. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I phoned everybody and they all said, there's no way. They said, you need $10,000 for an immediate boat. You need $10,000 for a high performance coach. You need 10,000 hours under your belt. There's no way. And you know how you did this question framing about how come?
Yes.
And a version of that is, okay, it's impossible unless. Right. And they're like, it is totally impossible. There's no way. You cannot do this unless you are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a gold Olympian, forget Paralympian, gold Olympian's pocket. And they're being sarcastic.
Sure.
And I'm like, do you know any?
Yeah.
And then the man, they said Magnus Lidgedal, he's in Miami, Florida. And I reached out to him and he had nothing to do with me.
Wow.
And my mom, she was eye to eye with that principal in kindergarten.
Yes.
And when she asked how come, she didn't say, I can tie my shoelaces.
Right.
She said she heard the principal say, we can't help her. We're worried about being stuck with her.
Right.
So she counter offered how come with, if it doesn't work out, no problem. Can we just try? Right. Her how come answered his concern.
Yes.
And she was eye contact with him. So I drove down and I got rid of everything I owned, my bed, my wall unit. I drove down and I got face to face, eye to eye with Magnus.
Wow.
And he still wanted nothing to do with me. And so I ended up sleeping in my car, hiding in his boatyard for 3 months.
Oh my goodness, Tracy.
3 months, washing and waxing his boats, kissing up to Magnus, being the Karate Kid of sailing.
Yeah. Wax on, wax off. Yep. Oh,
until Magnus finally said, come on, let's go sailing.
Wow.
And so it's true. Like, how do you know unless you try?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, okay, I took a risk and it was handed to you on a silver platter.
Did he ever tell you why he finally changed his mind? What was it? I mean, obviously, when someone shows that level of dedication, that be enough to switch anyone's thinking. But I'm curious, did he ever indicate like what it was that said, okay, finally I'll give in?
Well, there's two stories to that, right?
Okay.
He tells people, he said, I figured the only way to get rid of her was finally give her a ride, right? He says, I realized she wasn't going anywhere. She was going to be parked there for years.
Right.
So I finally gave up and gave in, kind of thing. But my version of the story is like on the, it was 89 days in very hot Miami weather, 5:30 in the morning. I wake up with sunrise because I'm in my car and I'm washing boats. And the way I faced it, right? And even in this pandemic, people say, how do you face it? A horrific news, horrific day when you feel the low of your low. And sometimes right now, like all my life, people have been like, bring us some positivity. But now people are saying, bring us some wellness. They said, I'm sorry, we can't just do the positivity message because people are too burnt out and they don't have the space for positivity right now because they're so broken and heartbroken. Well, what do you do? And so like 89 days. And I felt that way in the car. Wow. And I was eating Cheerios most of those days. Like I ate 89 days in a row. I ate Cheerios at least once a day, if not more.
Right. Wow.
And not a lot of fruit and vegetables type, like there wasn't the money. And so I would face the mirror in my car And I would say, today's the day Magnus is going to coach me. And by the 89th day, the mirror talk doesn't work unless you believe it. You don't just say it. You got to say it and believe it. And so sometimes that means repeating it. Right. And and so some days I say it twice. Some days I said it 12 times, but I didn't get out of my car until I believed the sentence.
Yeah.
Well, the 89th day, 25th recital to myself in the mirror, I stopped. I just didn't believe that Magnus was going to coach me that day.
Right.
But I had to get out of my car, and I'm sweating my face off because it's so hot. Like if you don't get out of the car by 6 a.m., you're like, you're basically, what's that? Slow cooker in my car.
Yes. Understood.
So I changed my sentence to the mirror, and I just said, today's the day I'm going to be the best version of myself. And I got out the car. And because I'd been there for 3 months, I knew how the cranes at the dock worked, how people could lift their boats in.
Yes.
And I went over and I helped somebody with the crane that was struggling.
Oh.
And some guy was coming in hot, and all the gold Olympians, they're all shouting, stop. And if the guy knew how to stop, he would have stopped, right? Sure. but myself, I'm like, let off the main, the line in the middle, push the boom away from you, back the sail, like head to me. And I bum shuffled over to where the wind was so that the boat was heading into irons, into the wind to slow the boat down.
Yes.
And they all just muscle, right? Whereas for myself with the no hands and no legs, I have to do like adaptive things, like let up a main, back the main, do things.
Okay.
So I could share with him some of my adaptive tricks, right?
Sure.
And Magnus saw me helping the sailors and helping the crane and rescuing this guy and tying off the boat. And he like clambers on down. He's super tall and his feet are super huge. And he's just like, bump, bump, bump. He's totally like the, you know what it is? You know what it really is silly. He's not the Jolly Green Giant. He's Shrek. and I'd like to say I'm Fiona.
Yeah, I understand.
But I'm not. I'm Donkey. And there's all these villagers that want a piece of Magnus.
Right.
And they're all really rough on him because he's a bit of an ogre.
Yeah.
And he's a bit of an ogre because they all want a piece of him for nothing.
That's right.
And here I am, Donkey. And so he finally said, you can sail. And I'm like, yeah. And he said, come on, let's go sailing.
Oh, that I love. I mean, it's a wonderful story. So many lessons, just perseverance, determination, the belief in yourself. I love the positive affirmation, those mirror talks that you had.
That we can all do.
Yeah, we certainly can. And I think really what I love it all, but one of the pieces that really stands out for me is that why piece. What it is that you're doing, that purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? Whether you're trying to get to the park or trying to get the cookie jar or trying to learn how to sail, get someone to teach you how to sail. Like, why is it what you're doing? Because that's what will drive you, Tracy, and that's what will keep you going, right?
Yeah, 89 days in a row, and through a pilot strike and through the Canadian Airlines and Air Canada were competitors. So before they were merged, they were petitioning better dead than red. And now they're working side by side at a check-in, right? On a ramp, floating airplanes. So there's that same drive for sport was in business. You know what's really funny is yesterday I had a flat tire.
Okay.
And that doesn't seem so funny, but it ended up, it was, I was telling my friend at the end of the day, it was a great day. It was such a great day because it was sunny. It was really warm. So if you're going to be stuck beside your car outside.
That's a good one. You picked a good one.
I loved it. Yeah. I was like, I am forced to be outside. This is great.
Yeah.
And then I inappropriately let my membership lap, my CAA membership lap over the pandemic because not driving much and wasn't thinking.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, a long time ago, many years ago in CAA, they kind of gave us basics of changing a tire. And the reality is I have no idea, but it's there, and it's
Yep.
probably, and my car is a pretty new car. I got it just before the pandemic.
Right. Yep.
But because I was just running a quick errand, I didn't have my legs on. I went outside with my short stubbies.
Right.
But that was a bonus too, because I'm stronger when I'm shorter, right?
I see. Yes.
Like imagine a clown on the stilts in a
That's
parade.
right. That's right. You're right. Good point.
They can't pick up heavy bags when they've got their stilts on.
Tracy, I've never even thought of that. Honestly, as you said, I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense. So yeah, I can see that.
And so and when I ski and when I sail and when I scuba dive, like horseback ride, everything is with my legs off. Yes. When I'm active and need to be muscle, right?
Right, because you're stronger lower center of base, right?
Yep.
That's exactly it. Okay, got you. Oh,
so it's a bonus. And and you know what? Before the pandemic, I never, except for sport, and even in sport, I showed up legs on.
Yep.
And then on the dock beside my boat, I whip my legs off and jump in the boat. Like I did not go out and about without my legs on ever.
Got you.
My entire life. But here now in the pandemic, I'm like, I'm gonna put my legs on to put my garbage in the garbage chute.
Right.
It's such a short day. So anyway, I went down in the car. So because I was center of gravity, I lifted out the chair that I have for long distances. I still haven't taken my ski bag, my ski legs, and my ski helmet and my skis upstairs. They're still in my trunk.
Right.
So I lift them out onto the sidewalk and I look under, and there's the tire. And it took me a while to figure out, like, you have to unscrew this thing to get the tire out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the middle. Yeah, I know you're talking about.
But I didn't know that, but I figured that out. And then I saw in the car, there's a jack and there's pieces and stuff.
Yeah.
So like all around my car, there's a wheelchair, there's ski legs, right? And now there's this tire, and there's me, no arms, no legs, waddling with this tire beside my flat tire. And I got this jack, and I'm looking at it, trying to figure out which way it goes. Right. And there's a series. What's it called? Oh, I can't remember. But on the series, this big rich doctor guy, he tries to jack up his car with the jack upside down.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, I can't put the jack upside down. So I got to figure out which way this jack is going to go. So I'm lying down in it, and I'm always wearing dresses, short dresses. And I'm trying to jack up my car and trying to figure out how to open the jack. And then the second, I don't know how long, I didn't know people were watching me, but as soon as I laid down to try to figure out where to stick the jack, like three, and it doesn't have to be men. It can be men or women.
Anyone can help. Yeah.
But the circumstance was that three men came from three directions, literally three directions. And they all descended on me. And then they looked at me, and then they looked at each other. They didn't know each other.
Right.
Juan, Andrew, and the third guy didn't give me his name. And they just took over, and they changed my tire. Oh. They gave me my spare tire. It was so funny. And then when I went to the place where I was getting my new tire, which thankfully was under warranty. I bought an extended warranty, and I didn't have to pay for the new tire. So I was lucky that way too.
Amazing.
But I told the guy my story, and he's like, you were trying to change your tire. Like, what were you thinking? Right. And and then I was kind of like, I could have done it. I would have figured it out if nobody showed up, right?
Yeah. See, I just love the attitude of just go and give it a shot. Like, just try. You know, you could be driving your car and your tire goes flat. You can sit there in the driver's seat being miserable, or you can go, okay, what are we gonna do? What can we do? And it's that desire and that willingness to always try is which so resonates with me, and what I love and what we talk about here, because that's so critical to our overall success, right?
Yes. And that was the same with busting Uber into Canada, or, supporting when Shoppers Drug Mart, so now I motivational speak with Loblaws and Amazing. Wholesale Way, and like a lot of the Joe Fresh, right? Like the subsidiaries that have all become family with Shoppers.
Yes.
But for me, it's those everyday stories that we've got. So I invite all of your listeners, right, to appreciate what's that past story.
Yeah.
Car breakdown, bullying, argument with someone you love, and that who did you rally? What did you do?
What did you do? Because you know what happened, and that's such a great point. Because we all face these things, Tracy, and we've all gotten past them at some point, but we've never given ourselves credit for it. We've never said, "Yay, me! Look what I had done." We just sort of go, "Oh well," and we move on. We go, "Yeah, well, I still don't have this, or my life is still missing that." It's like, no, your life has so much to offer because of the things that you've done to get to the point where you are now. And so I'm really glad that you touched on that point.
And we're all guilty, right? Like when I was brokenhearted about losing my job and like, what makes me happy? Oh, sailing. And I went. And right now, last week to 2 days ago, I was asked by a student in a school up in Tottenham, what's your toughest challenge?
Okay.
And I usually talk about bullying because I'm in a school and I think they can identify with it.
Sure,
but
sure.
She just walloped me with brutal reality, and more than climbing Mount Everest or anything, the toughest challenge right now is my mom's dementia. And look, I'm going to get all emotional about it. My mom has dementia right now, and we're really, really struggling.
Sure.
And you said about how we've all been through these. And I speak about being through these breakthroughs.
Yes.
And then it was, you right now saying like, let's apply it. Right. So what makes me happy no matter what? How am I going to stay strong? Sailing. Okay. So I'm going to get my butts to sailing. And, what's happening with the dementia and why is no one supporting? And how come we don't have long-term housing? And how come staff are no-showing? I'm going to ask, how come?
Yes.
And I'm going to, maybe talk to MPs or media or my lifelines in the ministry and say, how come? It's impossible unless, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so just talking with you, we need to bring those stories into it's so easy to reflect and look at hindsight success.
Yes.
But I'm just as guilty as the next guy is when you're in the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
We need to bring it in the moment. We need to get present to those past wonderful breakthroughs.
Yeah. I one concept that certainly helped me, and again, we all experience these disappointments, setbacks, obstacles, whatever. I oftentimes sort of, think of like life is kind of like those hills and valleys, right? Yeah. You're going to be down, right? You're going to run into something that holds you back. But, the sooner you get past that, the sooner you can get to the great stuff that's on the other side of those obstacles. And, so you can stay down, you can go down, but just don't stay there. Find a way. And I'll say to people, take whatever time that you need to get yourself to the place where you need to be, but just don't stay there, because you're going to miss out on opportunities, not only for yourselves, but how you can impact others. And I'm sure you've touched, I know you have touched so many through your work, and that's because you didn't stay down.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like everybody at the, and funny bit about the Magnus story is the dock where his boats were, where his boatyard was called Shake a Leg.
Wow. Wow.
Shake a Leg. And I thought that was so funny as a girl with no legs.
That's awesome.
and so before, like, I really became a conduit for Shrek and all the other villagers at Shake a Leg. And so I didn't just help me, right? It was definitely many that, and it became bigger than me. Yes. It became much bigger than me. Yeah. And I helped Magnus, he would coach me, and I did a whole bunch of applications and got him status as a U.S. sports club, Olympic sports club.
Okay, wow.
And he moved from Shake a Leg, not-for-profit trailer in a boatyard, to the U.S. Olympic Sailing Center. Because what's somebody as professional as him doing in a trailer in a boatyard, right? And so we dialed up his game, like, so everything. And I didn't do that so he would coach me. It just became evident that seemed relevant at the time. And it ended up winning for both of us. Right. And then I got all these great Olympic coaches. I got Magnus, but I also got everybody else that was hanging out at the U.S. Olympic boatyard.
Oh, man. Talk about the Olympic experience, Tracy.
Pardon?
Talk about the Olympic experience that you went through.
Oh, well, I've been I've been to the London Paralympic trials and the Rio Paralympic trials. And I've been to World Cup Olympic qualifiers as well, Olympic trials in Melbourne, Australia.
Wow.
And so the Olympic qualifier, the World Cup able-bodied people, 27 men, big and strong like you, Audley, and all of your fabulous basketball players.
Yeah.
And there were 3 women.
Yes.
And I was one of those 3 women. And 29 competitors all had arms and legs.
Yes.
I was the only one with no arms and no legs.
Of course.
And the bums boycotted me. It took a lot for me to put myself in their shoes.
Right.
Like you look like Vikings.
Right.
You're big and muscular.
Right.
I don't know what your nickname is, Oddly, but their nickname, like there's a guy from Singapore and Australia and New Zealand and Sweden and Germany and Scandinavia and Norway, like all these guys in their own language, they all had the same nickname. They were all called meat.
Meat. Okay.
And no, with an M.
Oh,
like
meat.
Meat.
Meat. Oh, meat. Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they're rail meat.
Right.
Rail meat. Their big, strong weight on the rail is like meat. It's like ballast for the boat. To level off a boat. And then there's me, 85 pounds, no hands, no legs, right? And they're all these guys are probably 285. I don't know. I didn't up a number, but
no, but still, I get your point.
Yeah. And they boycotted me.
Wow.
But I was so like, even the Canadian team coach said, don't go. My Ontario team coach said, don't go. My Toronto team coach that has been extraordinarily supportive to get me, to all part of it. And even Magnus, very passionately, Magnus, my gold Olympic coach who I was supporting, all of them said, don't go to Melbourne. But my heart, like, you just can't get a start line practice with 2 boats.
Right.
And so there was going to be 30 boats and and I knew that these arms and legs, I wasn't going to beat them.
Yes.
I just wanted to really crush the start line. And because it was just, you got to be talented on the start line with lots of boats. And what's that going to be like? So they boycotted me. And I never in a million years thought it was because of a disability.
Right.
Because I was so driven on being there. And I'm sure it was now, but I didn't know it then. And I just said, oh, how come?
How come? There we go.
Yep. I totally used the how come question authentically. Like, hey, what do I got to do before the race starts to get back into this race? Right. And they told me 1 class design and my boat's not like theirs. I have duct tape and a pool noodle. Because I'd rented a boat because, to fly a boat to Melbourne, Australia was crazy. Sure. And with no hands, I jerry rigged something with the tiller. And with no legs, I put a pool noodle in to help wedge me in the boat.
Got you.
But when they were saying that wasn't 1 class design, I pulled them out.
Oh, it's like, okay, we'll do it your way.
Okay, then, if that's all it is, boom, boom, they're gone. I'm back in the race. And to put myself in their shoes, they 24/7 for 12 years or more, like, and I know, because I did too. You sacrifice Christmas, birthday, holidays, friends, Ramadan, Hanukkahs, your babies. I have no children. I'm not married. Right. You sacrifice a lot of things to be a full-time athlete.
Yes.
And relationships. Yes. And you really feel it in a pandemic when there's no sport and no family and you're all alone and you kind of distanced yourself, not on purpose, but because you're so busy training, there isn't the weekly conversations. And so they've all done that too. And then this girl comes along and I'm going to clutter up their start line.
Right.
And this is their qualifier.
Right. This is real. So in their minds, this is real. Yeah. And you're not, because we didn't do what we did to get to this point.
And I did, but they don't know that.
That's correct.
And so, I expected to be 30th, which sounds like a horrible goal, but what the high performance Team Canada sailing coach did with able-bodied and people with disabilities on Team Canada, he told them, he said, each race you've got like 3 goals. So maybe it's to do a perfect top mark. Maybe it's to crush a start line. It's not to win the race. All of your training, high performance training, is to do 3 specific learning goals and crush those.
Right.
And plan your race and sail your plan. A lot of us, you plan the race and then you just survive the moment instead of sail your plan.
Very good point.
And so that's what so that was my plan, was to sail my plan and do 3 things: crush the start line, do a excellent top rounding, and to still be in the race for the first leg. Like to keep with the fleet in the first leg, because you go back and forth like a sausage in that particular race. And I came 7th overall out of 30.
Wow.
And I never expected that. Now there was light winds.
Sure.
And I'm light and they're all heavy. So that helped me.
Sure, yeah. But again, those are the same conditions everyone was, it wasn't like it was special set of circumstances made for you. Everyone was subject to the same conditions.
Yes. And, you said something interesting about, I loved and I was present to that in the moment, the empathy for the principal. Like there just wasn't the educational awareness at the time. And formally the schools were segregated. And I almost said, or the resources, but I'm really glad that I got to go to school, because I'm sure as a 4-way amputee, I would have had an educational assistant assigned to me.
Yes.
And I'm really lucky. And so we've got to be careful when we over prescribe too.
Yeah.
Because thankfully, I had to learn to cope and to handle bullying and in sailing, we have adapted boats. And I'm so glad that even somebody paralyzed from the neck down, like Superman, like Christopher Reeves, like anyone with a sip and puff and a special ballast, they could sail a boat.
Amazing.
But I would have been given an adapted boat. But for me, I had to get my sailing levels, I had to be able to write a turtled boat, like a little tiny dinghy. If it goes upside down, mast completely upside down, I won't get my level 4 unless I could turn that boat over.
Right. Gotcha.
And so I had to learn how to climb on the back of a boat and hug a centerboard and pivot and rock to flip a boat over.
Wow.
And how to get back in that boat. And no one today would probably put me through that circumstance.
Right.
Because of being no arms, no legs, even though I can swim, right? I had to be able to swim.
Yes.
So I love that I was born at the time that I was born, because I can sail anything, anywhere around the world, practically. Almost, right?
Yeah. Well, but in addition to the sailing, I mean, all the climbing Mount Everest and all the scuba diving, all sorts of things that you've done. It's you've taken that same approach, right? Like, first off, how come, and let's go give it a shot sort of mentality. And so I think you can apply that to everything you've done, which is I love what you're doing and how you're inspiring people at the same time too. So that's so awesome, Tracy.
It was so great. And I think it is scary, right? Like, it's scary with my mom's dementia, what's going to happen next. And I had no idea how I would ski, for example. No hands, no legs, right? Sitting ski, they've got crutches, but I have no hands.
Right.
So I wiped out. I have long legs, and we tried that. But because my legs end above both of my knees, when it's downhill skiing, my knees, they're like Pinocchio knees. They just bend. So my knees I wiped out with my long legs too. So I couldn't ski with my long legs.
Right.
But I wasn't going to figure out skiing on my couch at home. Right. I had to embrace the possibility. I'm going to ski. I don't know how I'm going to ski, but I don't know how. And so all of your listeners are kind of like, I'm going to win that person's heart over. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to face my boss and ask for a promotion.
Right.
Even though you don't know how, right? We had no idea how I would ski. And my first attempts of sit skiing and long legs weren't working.
Sure.
But what we ended up doing was using backwards boots I was next to a ski instructor, kind of like you. He's also bald and big shouldered like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And we were sitting side by side like you and I are right now.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining you probably have some pretty big feet.
Yeah.
And my ski instructor did too. And my inappropriate young mind, I looked at his boots and I'm like, holy cow, he's got big feet. And I'm sitting with my legs off and he's sitting with his boots off. And then I got this young, inappropriate thought. And I thought, my thighs, my legs, my stumps could fit in his ski boots.
Yeah.
And then I got a light bulb. My thighs could fit in his ski boots.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We put my thighs in men's ski boots backwards. Because forward ski boots are angled.
Got you.
And so it pitched me too far forward. And I am
right.
Knees to skis. Like when skiers squat, they bend their knees like a duck.
Yep.
But I don't have knees.
You need to, right.
So the backwards boots gave me that skier's tuck.
Yes.
Knees to skis.
Oh, wow.
But I wouldn't have done it. Like I could sit on the couch and Google all I want. No arms, no legs skiing.
Nope, you wouldn't have found that answer.
Just try.
That's right.
Right. I had to be beside my friend, beside my instructor. And so it is scary. And it's funny reading that Ubers, going to a safe space with staffing and all these strategists are talking about other businesses and everybody's, getting, thinks let's not have a recession. Let's embrace the possibility we might not.
Right.
Let's not have uncertainty and go where we're safe. Let's exceed uncertainty. Feeling uncertain is no excuse for inaction and embracing possibility.
Right.
Even when we don't know how, right? But I surround myself. I'm not doing it alone. I'm sitting here with Audley today.
That's awesome.
And all of your audacious listeners. I'm earning independence not alone. I 100% earned it with you today and all of your listeners. Like, it's so nice. You gave me a breakthrough right here on air. Well,
I'm so glad because I feel like I'm living that experience with you. So it is very much reciprocated, and and that's, see, that just goes back, Tracy, to why we do have to get out there. We do have to get off the couch. We can't stay in the valley. We absolutely have to move forward, because when we move forward, we're not only benefiting ourselves, but we are absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, I believe this wholeheartedly, that we're impacting others at the same time in a positive way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that, like with the flat tire yesterday, I told my guy, and then the lady that works the front desk came over to me and she's like, what were you doing changing a tire? Oh my gosh. But she's smiling. Right? And then the guy that sells oil and the counter and some of the other and tires and some of the parts, he came over. I heard that you tried to change your tire, and he came over. And like, I'm in a waiting room and there's like 12 other people and we're all sitting 6 feet apart, but there was like 12 people in this waiting room, all spread out. And then each one gets called while their car's fixed. And I just got to tell you, I think it's awesome that you tried to change your tire.
That's amazing.
And I'm just getting my tire changed.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying, now I feel like I'm shouting my horn. What I meant to say was like what you said, like any one of you out there listening, if you listen to Audley and you do what you're saying, you said it impacts not only yourself, right? Like I'm lying on the ground. 3 people came, and they came because they wanted to.
That's right. And those 3 people probably went home to their families and told them the same story. Yeah, right. Maybe. So you were a topic of conversation at the dinner table, Tracy. You were.
That's funny. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Oh man, Tracy, I have so much love this time with you. I oftentimes at the end of these wonderful conversations I'm blessed to have with these wonderful people, I go away and I think and I reflect and oftentimes I smile to myself. I already know that, days, months, weeks later, I'll be smiling, going, "Man, Tracy was so inspiring, and I love what you're doing." And yeah, I don't have to tell you not to change, because you're not. Because this is just the way you are. But the impact that you're having is profound, and so congratulations first and foremost. Keep it going, and for our listeners who want to learn more about you, or catch up with you, or jump into your world of Unstoppable Tracy, where can we send them?
Unstoppable Tracy. I like to keep it simple.
That's it.
Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, my website, my Amazing. Free downloadable book with self-coaching and some of our stories today.
Amazing.
Unstoppable Tracy.
Makes it easy. Well, that's that. Well, we're going to certainly do our part to make sure our listeners have a way to connect with you, and I would encourage them to do so. Tracy, thank you. I can't thank you enough. I was going to say thank you 3 times, and that still wouldn't have been enough. But I really appreciate you being here. This is so awesome. Be well and take care, Tracy.
And you, Audacious Ugly Stevenson.
That's awesome. Take care. Back we are here on the podcast, and it was great to chat with Tracy and hearing about all her remarkable accomplishments, climbing mountains and scuba diving and skiing, and the perseverance and resilience. It was so fantastic. And Tracy, I thank you for taking the time to be here. When I reflect on my conversation with Tracy, there was a ton of great things that she left with us. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my conversation with her, it would be this. There are 2 key factors that contribute to us experiencing that unstoppable feeling where it feels like we can accomplish and achieve anything. The first one is our belief system, which not only fuels us, but it also elevates our confidence to the point where nothing can hold us back. A bird sitting in a tree isn't concerned about the branch breaking, because a bird's trust doesn't lie in the branch, but rather in its own wings. And it's for this reason why the belief in oneself is so critical. In the face of adversity, our belief system automatically kicks in, and suddenly the things that we thought were problems aren't problems anymore. The other key aspect to being unstoppable is the execution of consistent actions over and over and over again. When we're consistent with our actions, what we're actually doing is building momentum. And over time, momentum builds and feeds upon itself. The more small steps we take, the more momentum we'll build, the more confident we'll be doing that activity or task, and the more productive, unstoppable, and audacious we'll be. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time we've got brand new content that comes out. We've reached the end of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, sadly enough, and I say thank you to our amazing and awesome listeners, all those lovers of audaciousness. Your support is awesome, and I appreciate you again and again. I say thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.